Hi, I'm Andy Marcus. I'm the Babbling Gourmet. I'm a caterer, I'm a foodie, and I'm a private chef on a farm between Renfrew and Douglas in the beautiful Ottawa Valley. And today I'm so excited to show you how to make these delicious dishes using locally produced ingredients. But first, let's get started. So another one of my favorite recipes is using locally sourced fresh venison. Super popular around here in the country. Something that people have on hand, usually in their freezer after their the hunting season. And it's a very, very lean meat, so we have to marinate it to tenderize it a little bit and really infuse it with sweetness, saltiness, so that when it cooks and sits, all of those flavors will just get absorbed into the meat, and instead of being what some might consider gamey, kind of reduces that a little bit. So it's a super easy marinade. Here we have a fresh venison steak. What we're going to do, which is always a super important part of any marinade, is soya sauce. So we're just gonna drizzle a little bit of soya sauce on top, okay? I like to use, again, granulated garlic. My favorite brand is Kirkland. It's probably one of the best I've ever found. So we're just gonna sprinkle that on lightly. Who doesn't like garlic, right? We're gonna add in a little bit of ginger on top, just a pinch. That helps bring out all the tasty parts of the meat. And pepper. Put that on top. And of course, the most important part of this is honey. So we're gonna drizzle on Farmer's Daughter's honey. It's a honey that I use for all of my cooking and all of my dishes. We're just gonna spread that around like that. And there we go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rub that into the meat. You can use your hands, you can use a spatula, you can use a spoon, whatever you want. Of course, I've got sanitized hands here, so I'm just gonna flip it over. Get that in there, mix it all together, and let that sit. Now, ideally, you wanna put this into the fridge, minimum a day, okay? I like to have it marinate for maybe 2 days. The longer the better, to be honest with you. And this is gonna be flash fried. Because the meat is so lean, if you cook it longer than just a flash and you intend on serving it beyond medium rare, it's gonna be a little bit tough and rubbery. So we don't want that. We've got this perfect little piece of meat here. Actually, it's not a little piece of meat, it's a big piece of meat. So we wanna make sure that we treat it super well and that it comes out tasting as good as it can. So you can wrap this in saran wrap or put it in a Ziploc bag if you want. I find sometimes putting it in a Ziploc bag in the fridge saves on space, and it gives you an opportunity to go in there and smoosh it around. So we just happen to have a venison steak that has been marinating in the fridge for 2 days in the same solution. I let quite a bit of the air out, and over the past couple of days I've been sort of squeezing it, kind of massage some of that, most of that marinade into the meat and get it as infused as possible. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take that meat out of the Ziploc bag, and as you can see, it's gotten a little bit darker. All that soy sauce and honey is in there. It's gonna be so tasty. We're gonna pull it out of the bag, and we're gonna keep a little bit of the sauce in the bag, okay? I know we have to cook it down. It has to come to boiling temperatures, but we're gonna keep some of this marinade as a reserve so that we can later on use it as a sauce to drizzle on top of the meat when we serve it for dinner, okay? So once we've got the venison meat out of the fridge, we're gonna let it come to room temperature for a few minutes because it won't shrivel up in the pan when it hits the heat. Okay, so we've just taken our beautiful marinated venison steak out of the fridge. It's been marinating in soya sauce and ginger and garlic and honey, Farmer's Daughter's honey. And we're going to do a quick sear on this meat, probably 2 to 3 minutes aside, and we're gonna take it off the stove and let it sit. Now, I like to add really yummy fats to this frying process. I'm not a big fan of oil when it comes to venison. I love to use salted butter. It browns the outside nicely, and it's creamier, and it makes a great base for the sauce that we're gonna make with the pan drippings, okay? So what we're gonna do is, this has already come to room temperature, which is what we wanted. I'm gonna take a generous amount of butter. I don't know, what does that look like, guys? Quarter cup, third of a cup. Did you know that I live in Butter Cottage? Anyway, we're gonna put this in the pan, and I'm gonna put it on high heat, and we're gonna look for a bubbling butter. We wanna get a sear on our meat, okay? So what we wanna do is have a nice crust, and that sear is gonna keep all that juice in, and that juice includes honey. So you know that when you cut into that meat, you're gonna have a nice sweet soy flavor, which will elevate this very, very lean and often gamey meat. So we're trying to take a bit of that gaminess away so that everybody can enjoy it. Okay, so what we've got going on here in our pan is that delightful sound of bubbling butter. Who doesn't love that sound? And this is the point, once it starts to bubble like this, that you want to put your meat in. Okay, you don't want it to get too brown because butter does burn quickly. So we're going to take this delicious, oh, look, it's so tender now, it's falling apart. We're going to throw this into the pan, try to get it all in one. Oh yes, the sound of cooking honey and butter together. Yum, yum, yum. Okay, so we're going to reduce the heat just a little bit, and we're going to let that go 3 minutes aside, maybe 4 minutes aside, because it's a big piece. We'll see. We want to have a nice crust. We're going to transfer it to a cutting board, and we're going to let it sit. And while it sits, it's going to retain its juices. Okay, so now we're at the stage where we're going to flip our venison steak over. You can see that the butter and the marinade. I wish you guys could smell this. All the butter and the honey and that delicious soy. So we're going to flip it over now. It's been cooking for about 3 minutes. On one side. Yeah, it's a pretty big chunk, of course. Obviously, if you have smaller cuts, it'll be a little bit easier. So we're just gonna flip it over, see all that delicious browning. And you know what happens when the meat browns like that? It leaves little bits behind in the pan, which we're gonna use to make a delicious sauce after. Okay, so we're gonna put this back on the flame here and sear the other side. Okay, so we've got our venison steak out of the pan. It's cooked four minutes on each side. Approximately. It's got a great sear, and we're just gonna let that sit, okay? Because like we wanna keep the juices from flowing out, and letting it sit and just cool off a little bit will make sure that it retains its juice. So what we've got left in our pan is a delicious combination of butter, all of that reduced marinade, and we're going to add more to the pan and finish off a sauce, make a super simple sauce. So what we've got here is our reserved marinade from our Ziploc bag that we've had in the fridge for a couple of days, marinating the meat. This has to come to a boil. We wanna make sure that it's cooked properly. So we're gonna pour a little bit of that reserved marinade in, and it's going to reduce thanks to the honey, and will produce a delicious sauce. So we're gonna put that back on the stove for a few minutes. I use my trusty Pampered Chef little mixer here. Put that back on the stove and heat it up. Now another trick that I like to use for this particular sauce is, we all have this in our fridge, especially in Renfrew County, preserves. So what I've got here is a choke cherry jelly made locally. And you can use actually any kind of jam, any kind of preserve that you might have in your fridge that you want to get rid of, and something sweet and red usually. Choke cherry, crab apple, anything that you want. Now you don't have to do this. This is just a little extra that I like to add on top of extra honey. So we're going to add in more honey to our pan, because hey, you can never have too much honey, right? So we're going to add in more honey to our saucepan, and then we're going to put in a little bit of this choke cherry jelly and make a delicious sauce for our venison. Okay, now that choke cherry jelly is going to dissolve in the pan. We're going to bring it up here, and I'll show you how easy that is to do. You can see how it's thickening up on its own. So we're going to make sure that that choke cherry jelly dissolves, and then we're going to put this back on. You can also add a splash of red wine to this if you want. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but the option is there if you want. Okay, so we're going to put it back on the fire and make our sauce a little bit thicker. Okay, so this is my favorite part about cooking a venison steak like this. Again, super easy, super delicious. We've got this reduced marinade. We've got honey in here. We've got any kind of preserves that you might have in your fridge. In this case, I use choke cherry jelly. We're gonna pour that over the venison steak. I mean, look at how it thickened on its own. Delicious. And we're gonna let that sit on there and warm that steak back up. So good. And of course you can add, you know, parsley or sprigs of rosemary or whatever you want. And sprinkle it with, geez, you can even put pistachios on top of that too. Look at that. Delicious, delicious, delicious. And that was easy peasy. Venison with a honey and soy marinade and sauce. Okay, so another thing that I like to add, crispy onions, crispy fried onions. You can buy these pre-made. French's makes them, I believe. We like to make our own around here. Crispy fried onions on top of that venison steak. I would recommend serving this with mashed potatoes. That gravy will go really well with that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to see how you guys made out making these things. You can email me your stories at any time to andy@thebabblingourmet.com or tag us on Facebook at The Babbling Gourmet. Show me some pictures, give me some insight into how it worked out for you guys, and if you have any questions or comments, you can always send them to me. If you're a local producer, I'm always up for a challenge. Feel free to send me any ingredients or feedback or questions or ideas, and I'll see what I can do with your ingredients.